Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? One second. Yeah, hope you all can hear me, right? Budhet, confirm? All right, you can unmute. Yeah, settings. So you all can hear me, right? Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. So
Good
welcome.
morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And welcome to the final seminar of the Class of Kings. Yeah. So today and tomorrow, we have a big job to do. That is our final seminar. So today we will be handling, I will tell you the plan in a while. So before that, I just want to know, I just want to let you know a few things. That is the security reasons. For security reasons, we have enabled the waiting room, because we had some disturbance during our map marking seminar because some of our students had shared the links with outsiders. So because of that, we had to take these additional security measures. So you won't be admitted always. So there's a waiting room in place, and don't leave the meeting. Okay, don't leave the meeting. If you have any connection issue due to that, if you left the meeting automatically or something like that, if you're trying to rejoin, put a message in the group or put a message in the, better you put a message in the group, don't message individually. Put a message in the group that you are waiting to join, then we will accept you. Okay, so tight security measures are in place. Unfortunately, this is due to our own students mistakes, because sharing the links with outsiders and they come to the class and they disturb, they send unwanted messages in the group, and they start scribbling on the whiteboards and stuff like that happened during the map marking seminar. So unfortunately, because of that, for everybody's safety, we have decided to enable the waiting room and enable tight security measures. So if you have any question, anything, you can contact admin, Miss Netmi. She is the admin of the class, because I might not be able to attend your requests and everything quickly because I'm engaged in conducting the seminar. Okay. So if you have any question, anything like that, post in the group or contact admin, right? I'm happy if you can post those issues in the group so I can also see, admin also can see, everybody can see, and then we can attend those requests easily, because there's one platform, there's a group for a reason, right? So you post your questions or you post your issues on the group so that we can attend to those easily. Okay, because we have like more than, this seminar we have around 70, but in the other classes also we have around 70 more students. So 150 students messaging me here and there. So sometimes I might not be able to attend those, within this short period of time. So I prefer, if you can, I recommend if you can post your messages in the group, right? If you have any issues, okay, without posting them individually, because I might miss. All right, Pudhe. So before we start, let's take a look at the plan that we have today and tomorrow. I will tell you, it's a brief plan. It's not a big plan. We'll keep it simple. No agendas or nothing like that. I didn't design an agenda or something like that. I mean, I felt like it's not required this time. We'll keep it simple. Okay. So today's plan is pretty simple. Today we will be revising the important theory parts from all lessons from grade 10 and grade 11. Okay, today is the revision day, right? Tomorrow is the paper discussion day. Today, if the time permits, we will discuss some figures in the evening. Tomorrow also we will be able to do that. Tomorrow the seminar will start at 9 o'clock in the morning, early morning, 9 o'clock, and then we will continue until about 6 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, finishing the paper and everything. That's the plan for tomorrow. So if the time permits, we will do figure discussions. And if we couldn't do the figure discussions, I'm planning to do that on another day before 30th this month, because after 30th, classes will not be allowed to be conducted by law. So according to the law, Pute, we are not allowed to conduct any classes after 30th. The government will announce that, maybe 29th or maybe 30th. So we will, so because of that, we have to conclude all of our classes before 30th. So if anything pending, maybe a small part or something like that. Hopefully figures, I'm trying my best to discuss everything within these 2 days. But if there's any excess baggage or anything like that, we will cover it before 30th and we will give you the recordings for those who cannot attend. Okay. So that's the plan, Pute, for these 2 days, and breaks will be given. Today's lunch break is planned from 12:30 to 2 o'clock, 1.5 hour break. Okay. 12:30 to 2 o'clock. And other breaks, Pute, there's no fixed time for other breaks. We will give you as we deem fit. Okay. Normally every hour we take a short break, because we follow international standards, we follow psychological principles in learning and everything. So we stick to those standards. So because of that, we normally take a short break every hour or so. But those breaks are not scheduled; those are unscheduled breaks. And the scheduled break for today is from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. And we are planning to finish the seminar today around 6 o'clock or 6:30, depending on what we are going to cover today. Okay, so our plan is to cover everything as much as we can when it comes to the important theory parts from grade 10 and grade 11 today. Tomorrow will be paper discussion plus figure discussion also, as the time permits. Okay. So any questions with it? If you have any questions about the seminar, anything, recording, the seminar is already being recorded. So for those who are missing any part or anything like that, we will provide the recordings later. Okay. Uh, after Monday, right? You will be getting the recordings after Monday. So if there's any delay or anything like that in getting the recordings or getting papers or anything like that, please bear up, because we have a lot of students to handle this time. So we are trying to handle it in a professional way, because minimizing issues as well, minimizing security issues as well. Okay. And the paper, Bhute, the paper most of the students did yesterday, the MCQ paper, we will discuss tomorrow. And for those who have requested the physical paper or the word format of the paper, we will give you later. Okay, please bear with us for that, right? Because there are security issues also, no, surrounding the paper, because it's a very serious target paper. So I don't want this paper going here and there around, and then you know what I mean, right? Like, I mean, rumors are very dangerous in Sri Lanka. So when I say this is a target paper, I don't know, our students might share this with somebody and rumors might start at spreading, and just don't want any issues last moment, right? The exam is in 2 weeks. So we don't want any paper going viral, or any issues happening in the last moment. So because of that, it's a target paper, it's a mock paper. So I will share with you for those who request, but we will keep it like to ourselves. Okay, not to share with anybody, right? This is not a, otherwise I would have shared it in the YouTube channel. I didn't do that because it's for our students, right? So that's what we are planning to do this time. So we have a second paper also ready for you tomorrow. And we will see how it goes, right? Okay. Give me a second. I'll be right back. Give me a couple of minutes. Yeah. All right, Pudhe. So the revision part of this seminar, we will follow a very effective and a very modern technique. I don't say it's a very modern technique, but when it comes to education, it's a little modern. This technique is called Pudhe brainstorming. Basically, what we do is in our seminar, in the previous year also, we did the same thing. We write all the important parts related to one unit in the whiteboard, okay, in one sheet. You can also use techniques like mind mapping and all. When studying, we are like, discussing those techniques in our class. We are practicing those techniques in our theory class and everything. So students who are part of my class, they know these techniques and everything right now. But for the new students, we have around 10 to 12 new students this time. I'm just telling you. So the techniques that we are using is a little different from other classes. And we are using modern techniques, which will basically, my technique is basically injecting you the theory parts into your head directly. Okay. So, we are giving tudes. We have a set of tudes in our class, well-prepared set of tudes that will help you in studying and everything. You know this. So I'm planning to give you some short notes before the exam. So like somewhere around next week, I will post the short notes in the group so that you guys can prepare for the exams. But we don't study short notes and everything in seminars. Okay. So the seminar is about injecting or absorbing the important theory parts into your head straight away so that you don't forget them. Okay. So because of that, I want you not to focus on anything else but the whiteboard and the voice of mine when I am explaining, so that you learn, you remember at the same time. Okay, so this is a proven technique that we have been using over and over again in our class. We have got great results in our class. Last year we had around 45, 50 regular students, and altogether we had around 60 plus students with the seminars and everything. But out of the 45 to 50 students, we have 25 A passes in our class and 15 B passes, 15 plus. So a few C passes and a very few S passes, right? S passes or C passes are from students who joined the last moment or didn't follow the plan properly. That I have to tell. No offense. But those who have A passes, they were there from the beginning. They followed the plan properly. And those who got B passes also, yeah, they worked hard for those as well. So we have a 50% A pass rate in our class. Like generally, I don't calculate much. I don't market my results much. But for those who have got A passes, they know this. So most of the students who are in our class this time also are either brothers or friends of those who got A passes last year. AOB passes, right? So good passes. So we have great results. We achieve great results because we follow great methods in teaching, right? So we will start today with grade 10 lesson number 1. We will gradually move grade 10 lesson number 1 up to grade 11 lesson number 8. Now remember this very well. We won't be able to cover each and everything. You can't cover 2 books in 8 hours, right? 8 hours or less. So we cannot do that practically. So what I will focus is, I have some focused areas this time, the targeted areas. So we will learn the theory parts of those targeted areas. I'm not going to tell you what area, but I'm just going to explain you the theory parts. But other than that, you have to also, like what we don't cover, you have to go to the book and read it. I'm telling the new students because you are not having the set of tudes that we provide in class. But for our students, I'm telling you, go back to the tudes and, like get your notes done and be ready for the exam. We have prepared you for this. Okay. So for the next 2 weeks, the study plan and everything we will discuss as we go on, right? I mean, not the time to discuss everything. It's big time that we start the seminar, right? The actual theory parts. Okay. So the first lesson of grade 10 is what, Pute? Yes, I want to keep the class interactive. So you can also unmute and talk.
Studying history.
No
Sources of
problem.
studying history.
Sources of studying history, right? Yes. Okay, one last warning for all students. If you have not renamed with your new registration number, please do now, okay? Because admin might remove you otherwise. Hessela, are you there? Hessela. Hessela, can you rename yourself today? Security reasons, right? You know, we take security very seriously because we have our precious students in the class, especially girls. Yeah, so their privacy is important. So we take care of those security issues very seriously, okay? Right. Sources of studying history. Yes. Now, when it comes to history, Budhe, now look at this. Before we start, I want to tell you a connection between what we are basically, what we have done wrong all these years and what can be right from here onwards, okay? So history is the history is the study about the past, right? Like, I mean, history is the written past. If something is not written, we don't call it history. We call the written past the history. If it is not written, Buddha, we call it prehistory. That means before history. Okay. So we have eras like prehistoric era, protohistoric era. We learn that when we do lesson number 2. But here, when it comes to history, we are talking about sources of studying history, meaning that what we can use, what things that we can use to study history. So sources means like, something that can give you information. Sources of knowledge we are talking about here, like, not any other sources. In science, you are talking about energy sources, something that can give you energy, something that can emit energy is called an energy source. But in history, we are not talking about energy sources, we are talking about knowledge sources. So anything that can give us knowledge related to history, we call it sources of studying history. Now again, I'm telling you, history is the study about the written past. Okay, written past. Right. Here we will be talking about different types of sources that can give us information about history. Now, before we go on to that, history is not rocket science. Let me tell you this. Many students are so worried when it comes to history. Okay. They think that they can't understand. Maths and science seem far easier than history, right? Isn't it? For many students. When it comes to history, they struggle, they panic. That is because they don't know the connection and they don't know what we are focusing on when it comes to history. In the school, the teachers or anywhere, they are telling the history is like something that is very, very serious and very difficult. You got to focus too much. I mean, nothing like that. If you are smart enough and if you know the connections between those, the links between those areas or the connection between those, if you form those connections, it will be fairly a very easy subject to learn. Okay. So history, in my opinion, in Sharif sir's class, the class of kings, we name this the class of kings for a reason because we want you to go to the next level. We want to produce kings in this class. People who are not exactly kings, but people who think like kings, like leaders, different than others, levels above others. When it comes to history, I have identified 4 areas. Nothing else. This is not rocket science. Like I said, we don't calculate the distance from the Earth to the Moon or something like that, right? So we don't do those kind of complex calculations or complex theories and stuff like that. It's a fairly simple subject if you know the connections. So history is about just 4 things: people, places, buildings, and events. Nothing else. Okay, history is not rocket science. History is about people. So here we will be learning about different people like leaders, kings, those who contributed to the society, politicians. We will talk about scientists, yeah, inventors, authors, these type of people, activists, these type of people, nothing else. So we will talk about those people and we will learn how they contribute, how they contributed to the society. And history is about places. We will talk about places like kingdoms, capitals, places in the map, towns, cities, their importance and stuff like that. And nothing else, right? Countries also included. And then we'll talk about buildings like palaces, different types of building, religious buildings, tanks or other types of constructions, that are significantly important when it comes to our past, or technology, the associated technology used in those buildings. For example, Ruan Valley Sai, we speak about that in grade 10 lesson number 5. So what kind of technology that was used in building those buildings and the importance of those. And events, we will talk about treaties or agreements that happen between different parties. We will talk about the wars. We will talk about conventions. We'll talk about fights. We will talk about invasions, these kind of events, right? So that's about history, nothing else. So when I say, when we learn something, when it comes to history, it's all about these 4 things. One or more of these 4 things will have a link to whatever we are learning from here onwards. So just form the connections and learn those, nothing else. So when I say person, when I say King Dutugamunu, you have to remember the most important thing about him first, and then a few more things. That's it. So when I say Dutugamunu, he falls into this category. People. Yeah, he's a king. And any place related to his ruling, any buildings that he created, and any events that took place during his time, or any contribution that he did. That's it. Okay. So simple as that. So when you start forming the connections, history becomes the easiest subject. That is why our students score very well when it comes to the exams and everything. So fairly, I'm telling you, I'm not boasting, but any student who come to my class, within 2-3 months, he normally takes 20 marks more than that he used to get in their school exams, right? So O levels also it's the same. So O level paper is easy for our students in my class, right? Okay. So Budhe, sources of studying history. Like I said, we are talking about the knowledge sources here, sources that can give us knowledge when it comes to studying history. Okay, so we will keep it simple here. So we have 2 types of sources that can be used to study history: literary sources, and what is the other one, Pute?
Archaeological sources.
Literary sources and archaeological sources. Simple, right? Yeah. So literary sources means Pute written sources. So if we have a book that can give us information about history, that can give us knowledge about history, we call it a literary source. Okay, the word literature is coming from literary. So anything that is written, we call it literary sources. Okay, anything that is written on books, we call it literary sources. Other than literary sources, if there's something that can give us information about the past, we call it archaeological sources. Okay, if there's something, if there are things that can give us information about the past. If there are books that are written that can give us information about the past, we call it literary sources. Literary sources also, Pute, we have 2 categories. We can divide them into 2 types. Literary sources. What are those 2 types, Pute? Anybody?
Local literary source,
Local
foreign
literary
source.
sources, foreign literary sources.
Very good. Local literary sources and foreign literary sources. Local means, Pute, Sri Lankan. Okay, local means in our own country. So you go to, if a foreigner comes to our place, if a foreigner comes and asks you, where are you from? You don't say, while staying in Sri Lanka, you don't say, I'm from Sri Lanka. Okay, you say, I'm a local, right? Meaning that you are from here. I am from here, meaning that you are local. So local means from here, from your own country. Okay, so you don't say, recently, I saw a video that a foreigner, one guy is scolding a foreigner, get out. Yeah, something like that, right? Have you seen that video? Yeah, he was arrested later. So this guy, yeah. So this guy should have said, like, I'm a local, right? So again, foreigner, I'm not saying, like, see, we all blame that guy, right? But I see 2 sides also in the story, as history students, we see both the sides, right? So we try to strike a balance. We become unbiased and we try to criticize both sides. Okay, what could have been done better? How the foreigner also could have avoided this situation without provocating or without angering that guy is wrong, obviously. Yeah, 90% that guy is wrong. Yeah, the 10% foreigner also. So could have been avoided. Unfortunate incident. What to do? Yeah. Because this guy didn't learn history properly in school. That is what happened to this guy. He didn't come to my class, so I wasn't teaching anyway. He's must be like in his 50s. This guy. So stupid guy. What to do? Yeah. So you tell a foreigner that you are a local. Okay. When you go somewhere, like when I was in Dubai, we call the people from Dubai, we call the people from UAE locals because they're from that country. So local literary sources means Pute, literary sources that are written within the country by locals, by people from the same country. Okay. So anything that is written that contains information about history from the people of the same country, that is called local literary sources. In this case, we are talking about Sri Lanka. So local literary sources related to Sri Lanka, we will discuss a few examples, right? One second. I'm just going to lock the meeting now. So nobody can join. Yeah. This is very annoying, in a seminar. People joining and then strangers might come in and yeah. Meeting locked. All right. Now I can peacefully do the seminar. Any other question? Okay. Right. So we are talking about local literary sources. So I believe everybody understand. If you don't understand, please raise your hand. Okay. I might be able to explain you in different words. So local literary sources means books that contain information about history written by locals in Sri Lanka. Right. We are talking about Sri Lanka here. We are not talking about the world here. And foreign literary sources are books that contain information about the past of Sri Lanka written by people from other countries. Okay. So foreign literary sources, Pute, we have two types as well. Who can tell me this?
So foreign literary sources that were written by people who came to Sri Lanka and wrote
Visited
about
Sri
it.
Lanka and
Yes.
others who didn't visit Sri Lanka.
Foreigners, yeah. Literary sources or books that were written by foreigners who came to Sri Lanka and studied about Sri Lanka, spent some time in Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka from their own experience. That is foreigners who visited Sri Lanka. And there are also foreigners who didn't visit Sri Lanka. I put short words here, okay? So foreigners who didn't visit Sri Lanka, but who heard about Sri Lanka from others and wrote about Sri Lanka. We have different types here, right? We have different types of literary sources here. We have several categories here, as you can see. So let's take a look at a few examples now, okay? So when it comes to the local literary sources, we have different types of books, Pute, that can be used to study the history of Sri Lanka. The main type of book that we can talk about is the chronicles. Chronicles. Now, chronicles means with the chrono. The word chrono means with it relates to time. Okay. Now, the best word, official word to call a properly working wristwatch is chronometer. The chrono means with it relates to time. So, chronicle means any book that is written in a timely order, meaning that what happened first, what happened next, like that, in a timely order. Okay. So, that is called chronicles. So, we have several chronicles in Sri Lanka, which is basically a record of the continuous history of Sri Lanka, like you are writing a diary. Like you're writing a diary every day, we can also write the history of Sri Lanka from the beginning. Okay. So we have a few books that contain information like this. And out of them, the first chronicle that was written in Sri Lanka is called Deepa Vamsa. Deepa Vamsa. Deepa means with the island. So Deepa Vamsa, if you translate this to English, this is called the Island Chronicle. Deepa Vamsa is the first chronicle. Okay. And Deepa Vamsa was written in about 4th century. The problem with Deepavansa is, Pute, it was written by a group of monks. The problem with Deepavansa is the information that is there in Deepavansa is a little short or brief. And there are some repetitions, same information repeating again and again. So in order to make a proper chronicle, in order to address the doubts, in order to clarify the mistakes that were committed in Deepavansa, one Mahanama Thero, who lived in Anuradhapura, in Diksanda Senevia period in Anuradhapura during the time of King Dhatusena in Anuradhapura kingdom, he decided, okay, I'm going to write the Sri Lankan history properly in another chronicle, properly addressing all the mistakes in Deepavansa. Okay, studying all the other, what do you call, sources related to history, studying all the other books and everything related to history. And that chronicle is the most credible chronicle or most trustworthy chronicle in Sri Lanka. And that contains information, continuous information written about Sri Lanka, about the past of Sri Lanka. And we call that chronicle what, Pude? What is the name of that chronicle?
Mahavamsa.
Mahavamsa. Maha means with a great. Vamsa is the chronicle. Mahavamsa, the great chronicle. Mahavamsa has two parts. The first part of Mahavamsa is called Mahavamsa itself. The second part of Mahavamsa is called Chulavamsa. Unfortunately, the word Chulavamsa is not there in the book. Maybe students might get confused. That's why the people who wrote the book might not have included that. But Chulavamsa is the second part of Mahavamsa. So Mahavamsa is constantly being written. We can argue that it's still being written. Okay, still the events of history in Sri Lanka can be written. Now we have a lot of other sources also, like the internet and everything, where we have a lot of information stored. But here we are talking about a period that, you know, there was no other information, and one book that was dedicated in writing the continuous history of Sri Lanka. And that book is Mahavamsa. So the first part of Mahavamsa, for example, the first part of Mahavamsa had a, you know, it was written in Pali, right? So these chronicles, Sinhala language was not at a very developed stage back then. So these chronicles were written mainly by monks. So Mahavamsa was written by Mahanama Thero, who was a prominent monk scholar in the country, had enormous knowledge when it comes to history and languages. So he wrote Mahavamsa in Pali, the language Pali. So because of that, some areas are a little difficult to understand. So in order to clarify that, we call it an annotation or interpretation of Mahavamsa. So there was another book written to clarify certain areas on the first part of Mahavamsa. And that book is called Vansattappa Kasini, okay, or annotation of Mahavamsa, or interpretation of Mahavamsa. Vansattappa Kasini, okay, Vansattappa Kasini. I'm not writing that here, just absorb it into your head. When you see the word, you know now. Right, certain things, everything we are not writing here, just, you know, we are talking. So that's why I told you, listen to the seminar with a free mind, okay, free mind, and absorb what we are telling you here, right? Okay, so those are some chronicles that we are focused on. And apart from that, we have other types of books as well, which can be used to study the history of Sri Lanka. We have Buddhist religious texts. Two examples, Puja Avaliya, Bodhivamsa, Tupavamsa, Dhatuvamsa, Saddharma Alankara. We have several books like that that can be used to study the history of Sri Lanka in a Buddhist perspective, Buddhist religious texts. Okay. And we also have other books like Rajavaliya, for example, which contain political information from Gampolo to Kotte period. Rajavaliya. You know, Rajavaliya. Valiya means list. Raja means king. Namavali means list of names. So Rajavali is list of kings. Rajavali is also a very important literary source that can be used to study the history of Sri Lanka. Apart from that, we have literature sources as well, which have a literature importance. In Sinhala, you have Sinhala literature, you are learning these as well, like Sandesha Kavya, for example, and Prashasti Kavya, Hatan Kavya. So Sandesha Kavya, we have Salalihini Sandesha, Mayura Sandesha, Tisara Sandesha. We have other Sandesh as well, like Paravi Sandesha, Gira Sandesha. We have many Sandesha Kavyas like that, that contains information about the history of Sri Lanka. We can learn, we can read those Sandesha Kavya. We can appreciate the literature in that. At the same time, we can also learn how things worked in the past. We can learn history of our country as well. So when it comes to Hatan Kavya means the battle, you know, poem. battle epic poems. We have Ingrisi Hatana, Sita Hatana, Constantinu Hatana. We have books like that. And when it comes to Prashastika, Prashasti means poems written praising somebody, praising normally a king. So we have the Parakumbha Sirita, for example, that is praising King Parakramabha. Okay. So we have books like that. We have local literary sources like that that can be very, very useful in studying the history of Sri Lanka. Understand with everybody? Yes?
Yes.
So foreign literary sources. When it comes to foreign literary sources, there are foreigners who visited Sri Lanka, who spent some time in Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. Pahiyantero is a very good example. Pahiyantero or Fahiyantero. Pahiyantero in Sinhala, Fahiyantero in English. Fahiyantero came from China, spent some time in Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. Fahiyantero's accounts about Sri Lanka. Robert Knox, who came to Sri Lanka from England, a big story behind that. I'm not trying to explain you everything here because it's a seminar. So Robert Knox spent like 19 years in Sri Lanka, and while he escaped to his home country, he wrote about Sri Lanka. That book is translated in Sinhala as Eda Heladiva, or in English we call it an historical relation to island Ceylon. Lot of information about Sri Lanka and the Kandyan kingdom is contained in that. So that's a very important source to study history when it comes to foreigners who came to Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. Ibn Battuta from Arabia came to Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. So we have several sources like this, literary sources, foreign literary sources written by foreigners who came to Sri Lanka, okay, and spent some time in Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. I just told you 3. There are few more in the book. Foreigners who didn't visit Sri Lanka. There are people who did not visit Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. 2 very good examples. Let me tell you 3 very good examples. That is the Ptolemy's map of Sri Lanka. Ptolemy, or Claudius Ptolemy, who was a geographer who lived during the Roman Empire, we can say, in Alexandria and Egypt. He never visited Sri Lanka, but he met people who visited Sri Lanka. Based on that information, he drew a map of Sri Lanka. So if you check the map of Sri Lanka with modern Google map, you can see 2000 years ago, Ptolemy drew this map, and it's very, very beautiful, very, very accurate for a 2000. Those days, we didn't have satellite images or anything like that, right? So you can understand how much knowledge even Ptolemy possessed. Even while not visiting Sri Lanka, he was able to draw a map of Sri Lanka. Other than that, we have Xuanzang Thero from China, who visited India, who met people who visited Sri Lanka, who learned about Sri Lanka and wrote about Sri Lanka. And also we have information about Sri Lanka in books like De Mundo by Aristotle, Indica by Megasthenes. Indica is written about India, but Megasthenes also, put some information about Sri Lanka in that. So we have different types of literary sources related to foreigners who came to Sri Lanka or who didn't come to Sri Lanka or wrote about Sri Lanka. Everybody got it, Pudhe? So that's about the literary sources that you need to know. So more information is there in the book, in our tudes as well. So go through and get familiarized yourselves, because there might be one MCQ coming pointing out to the literary sources this time. Okay, right. When it comes to the archaeological sources, Puthe, we have 4 types of archaeological sources mainly that can be used to study history. Okay, the first type is called epigraphy. Second one, coins. Third one, ruins. Fourth one is drawings, sculpture, antiquities. Okay, right. When it comes to epigraphy, what are epigraphy? Epigraphy means put their writings on different types of surfaces. Now, writings on books, we call it what, Pute? We call it literary sources.
Literary.
Writings other than books. There might be writings other than books, right? Like on stones, on copper plates, on gold plates, on clay slabs, on wood. Writings on different types of surfaces, on walls. We call them epigraphy. Writings on books, we call them literary sources. Okay. So epigraphy, we have different medias of epigraphy, meaning that what is the medium that is used to write. So if it is written on stones, we call them inscriptions. If anything written on stones, we call it inscriptions. Okay? Inscriptions. And epigraphy, we have writings on walls. We have writings on wood. We have writings on copper plates. We have writings on golden plates. We have writings on urns. We have writings on clay slabs and different types of surfaces. Okay. Those are all called epigraphy. And inscriptions. Inscriptions also put the writings on stone, also put the based on the size of the stone or the use of the stones. We have several types. We have mainly 5 types of inscriptions like that. Okay, based on the size and shape and use of the stone that any writing can be found. Okay, so the 5 types of inscriptions are rock inscriptions, huge rocks. If you have any writing on a huge rock, on top of the rock or on the rock, we call it rock inscription. So rock inscription in Sinhala, what do we call that, Pute? Rock inscription? Girilipi.
Girilipi.
Now Sigiri is a rock. Sigiri, Sihagiri, Sinhagiri, Lion Rock. So Giri means rock, Pute. So rock inscription means any writing found on rocks. Okay? Rock inscription. Then we have the second one, cave inscriptions. Cave inscriptions are called Len Lipi. Yeah, Lipi means inscription. Okay? Lipi is inscription. Yeah. Lipi means today we call it for letters, right? But here Giri Lipi means rock inscriptions. Okay. So cave inscriptions are Len Lipi. Len means with a cave. Caves. Okay. Lena means one cave. Len means caves. So Len Lipi means cave inscriptions. Okay. Kitulgala Belly Lena. Belly Lena is a cave. So Len Lipi, I mean, no inscriptions in Kitulgala Belly Lena, but I'm just telling you the word, right? So Len Lipi means cave inscriptions. Then we have, next up, we have pillar inscriptions. You know, in the caves also we can write. I'm just telling you, I will just explain you what is cave inscription. So basically in the caves, you build a drip ledge in the cave like a groove to prevent water from falling inside, and you can write something there, right? So mainly those caves, we have inscriptions near caves, written near caves, mentioning about people who granted those caves to the monks and so on. Okay. So pillar inscription is the next one. Sometimes, you know, we have writings on stone pillars, arranged stone pillars. Okay. You know, sometimes, you know, you keep those pillars in the front of a house, beautiful pillars for beauty, not as structural pillars. Okay. Not like the pillars that you have in the house. If you have a 2-story house, you might have pillars in the house. So we are not talking about those pillars. There are no writings on those kind of pillars, but arranged stone pillars. They are called pillar inscriptions. In Sinhala Pute, we call them Tamlipi. You have to learn the Sinhala words as well. Pillar inscriptions. Then next up, we have Puarulipi or slab inscription. Huge stone slabs are used to write various historical events on those, various rules and regulations, stuff like that. So slab inscriptions, we call them Puarulipi in Sinhala. Okay. And we have another type of inscription, that is
Seat
inscription. Seat inscriptions, we call it Asana Lipi. Asana Lipi. In temples and all, you see stone seats have been arranged in altars or pulpits. You can see, you can kneel down and read those. No, those are not to be seated upon. Those are not real seats, but they look like seats, but there are writings on. Okay. So those are some of the inscriptions that you must learn. When it comes to walls, a good example for this is Sigiriya, the mirror wall in Sigiriya, Katapat Paur, the graffiti in Sigiriya. That's a part of epigraphy that relates to epigraphy. Okay. And then when it comes to wood, writings on Ambakke Devale, writings or carvings in Ambakke Devale in Kandy, good example. When it comes to copper plates, a good example is the Panakadu copper plate, which contains information about King Vijayabhau the First, who ruled Polonnaruwa Kingdom. When it comes to golden plates, we have the Vallipuram golden plate, which contains information related to King Vasabha. So much information is included in the Vallipuram golden plate about King Vasabha appointing, for example, Minister Rishigiri to rule Jaffna Peninsula or Nakadiva. So much information can be learned, found in inscriptions or other medias of epigraphy like this. Okay. And when it comes to coins, coins are another very important source of studying history under archaeological sources. Now, coins don't fall under epigraphy because coins are molded. Coins, you don't write on coins, even though they have symbols or letters. Coins are molded material, okay? Meaning that you create a mold and you pour the molten metal in that and then you form the coin. So because of that, coins don't fall under epigraphy. It's a separate type of archaeological source. Okay, remember that very well. So there's a separate branch of studies related to the study of coins. We call it numismatics. If you are studying about the past, we call it history. If you are studying about the earth, the structure of the earth and everything, we call it geography. If you are studying about the stars, the moon, the solar system and the universe, we call it astronomy. If you are studying about the coins, we call that branch of studies, what Pude? Numismatics. Numismatics. So we have a lot of coins that were found from the past. We don't only have Sri Lankan coins, but we also found foreign coins. Coins are very important source of studying history. By studying the coins, you can learn so many things. You can learn about the ancient metal technology, types of metals and the technology that was used behind those. By studying the symbols of the coins, you can also understand the religious beliefs and the language and these kind of things that existed in the past. By studying the source of the coin, if it is coming from another country, you can understand the international trade relationships that Sri Lanka had with other countries. So much information can be learned by studying simply a coin. Yeah, the piece of metal. So that is why the study of coins is another separate archaeological source or separate branch of science, so studies called numismatics. So when it comes to coins, we had coins like the very old coins, the golden coins, we call them kahapana or madhyakalina ran kahavanu. Another golden coin are called akka, and purana and dharana were another names used to call these gold coins or old coins. Apart from those old coins, we also have hasebu coins or the elephant coins. We also had the swastika coins with the swastika symbol. We call them swastika coins. Apart from those types of coins, we also had coins from Rome, Roman coins, Indian coins, Chinese coins, which points out to the fact that we had trade relationships with those countries in the past. Okay, so that's about coins. When it comes to ruins, ruins means the remaining parts of any construction that was there in the past. So ruins of tanks, ruins of palaces, ruins of religious places like temples can be found in many places in the country. So we can learn so much with the ruins. We can learn about the about the architectural ability, the creative ability, the designs, architectural designs, and also the technology that existed when making those buildings and everything can be studied, can be learned by studying about the ruins. Okay, so we have so many ruins. We can go on talk about the ruins for one full day if you want, but here about the general idea about the ruins, right? And then we have drawings, sculpture, and antiquities. Okay, we have drawings. If you go to Sigiriya, you have frescoes in Sigiriya. Remember, Sigiriya graffiti is different. Sigiriya graffiti is epigraphy. That is in the mirror wall, the writings of poems. Kurutu Gigila Gana Singale. But drawings, when it comes to paintings, we have Sigiriya frescoes. The ladies in Sigiriya, for example, the paintings, yeah. The favorite photo of the book is in page number 58, I believe. Right? Go to page number, yeah. Yeah, your favorite photo, right? In the book, yeah? You can see it in page number 58. So that is Sigiriya frescoes, okay? Frescoes in Sigiriya or paintings in Sigiriya. That's a good example for drawings. Sculpture, we have a lot of sculpture, okay? We have a lot of statues all over the country, right? Very old statues. Unfortunately, to keep the syllabus very concise, so very kind of compressed, they haven't included a lot of sculpture. Like we have a lot of statues like Aukana statue, statues in Galvihare, Samadhi statue. You can talk about those statues for, days, right? But the only statue that is mentioned in the book is the statues in Isurumuni at the head of the horse and man. Yeah. So that statue is also important. We will learn about it when we discuss the like photos as well. Okay. Then antiquities are things that are coming from the past, things that are used by people in the past. They can be swords, thrones, crowns, suits, beds, tools, weapons, those kind of things used by people. We can also learn so many things about the past by studying those antiquities. So I believe that the sources of studying history is very much clear now. If you have any question, Budhe, please ask quickly. Yeah, we'll go for a short break and then we will discuss. We will discuss lesson number 2 after that. Any question, Budhe? So apart from that, we have in the book, Pute, we have importance of learning history. Benefits of learning history, for example. So go through those and make some notes. If you haven't made any notes, make some notes, and because they might ask you to write those things, write 2 benefits of learning history, like proper understanding of the society and the culture, or the one world lives. Or another benefit of learning history is like understanding the present through past experiences and building or constructing the future. Or in the book it says construct the future by understanding the present through past experiences. That's a big benefit of learning history that we can talk. Apart from that, we have uses of literary sources and so on. We have some target questions as well from this unit. So this time we are expecting a full essay question from this unit. I'm expecting one. So we will see how it goes when we discuss we will discuss about the parts that we didn't discuss here when we do the paper. Okay. So I believe everybody is okay with that. Apart from that, it's very important to protect the archaeological sources. We have a law in Sri Lanka preventing any harm to these archaeological sources because they are very valuable sources which is helpful in establishing the Sri Lankan identity or national identity. So archaeological sources, for example, places like Sigiriya, or statues or drawings or coins, these must be protected at all costs. So ruins also, okay? For example, there are ruins in many places of the country which are not even discovered yet. So the problem for these archaeological sources is with the books, you can preserve them in a library. Books, you can keep them in a museum or in a library. Literary sources, they don't have a big challenge in getting destroyed. But archaeological sources, they are everywhere in the country and some of them are not even discovered. The problem is like, if you are building a house somewhere, you might also find another house or ruins of an ancient temple or something like that in that, right? So because of that, it's very important to understand the importance of archaeological sources, and they are in a danger of getting destroyed because, people are making highways, people are building houses, people are building buildings, people are expanding the cities. Mega projects are going on in the country, construction projects like bridges and highways. So archaeological sources might get destroyed. We might never know that sometimes, when you are digging to make these big constructions, they might get buried forever. So because of that, we need to understand how to identify these archaeological sources and we need to protect them at all costs. And also it's a punishable offense to destroy any archaeological source. I remember there was a girl who didn't come to my history class who went to Sigiriya like 5 years ago. I think it's 6 or 7 years ago. And she wrote her name on the mirror wall in Sigiriya. Okay. So you can't write now mirror wall in Sigiriya, Katapat Paura. There are epigraphy that were written like 800, 1000, 1500 years ago. So now you are not allowed to write anything. So she wrote her name and she drew a heart or something and an arrow or something like that. Then she got punished from the police 6 months in jail or something like that. So it's very dangerous. It's a punishable offense, a criminal offense to destroy or harm any type of archaeological source in the country. There might be an essay question relating to that. So I just told you the importance of protecting archaeological sources because they are prone to get destroyed. That is why we need to protect those. Okay, everybody okay, Bude? So that's it about the first lesson. Done and dusted. 5 minutes break. We will start lesson number 2 after that. Everybody okay?
Sir, what's national identity?
National identity, Bude, look, you are Sri Lankan, right? So when you are going to another country, for example, if you see rice and curry, that is our identity, right? That's our culture, that's our identity. So same like that, if you take Sigiriya to India, okay, let's say you become a big machine and take Sigiriya to India. Can you call it Sigiriya anymore? Or can you, yeah? Can you call Sri Lanka without Sigiriya? That's what we call the identity. So all those archaeological sources together forms our identity. Now people say, okay, let's say for example, you are telling that we have a very long history. We have a history of 2000 years, 2500. Okay, let's say I can prove that we have a history of 2000 years. Somebody is saying, okay, prove. Take them to Ruanwali Sahib. More than 2000 years old. Do any test you want. I can prove that this is very, very old. This is more than 2000 years old. That is our identity over there. So if you don't have that, if you destroy those archaeological sources, we cannot prove our identity. We cannot say anything about our country. So that's why we need to protect those. Okay? Because archaeological sources are our national identity. Without the archaeological sources, you can't call Sri Lanka Sri Lanka. You can't call Sri Lanka having a 2000 or 2500-year-old history because you don't have anything to prove. Understand with it? Yeah?
Thank you, sir.
All right. We'll see you in 5 minutes. 11:20. We are starting lesson number 2 and we're going to finish it soon. Huh? Lesson number 2. We're going to finish it at a glance. Yeah. Okay. Half an hour for that. All right, Pute. Everybody here? Everybody okay?
Yes,
Can you hear me, right?
yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, no? Right, nice. Okay, let's continue. So, second lesson. This time we are not expecting an essay question from second unit, but you never know. I'm not a magician. I'm not God. So you never know. I'm just telling you what my target is. But last 2 years we had essay questions from this unit. So chances are very low that there will be an essay question from this unit, but you never know. Be ready for that. So we will just discuss the most important areas of unit number 2 now, right? Okay. So to discuss this easily, I have opened a timeline. Okay, this is called a timeline. So let's say here in Sri Lanka, we are talking about ancient settlements here. How settlements started in Sri Lanka from the ancient times and up to present. How it expanded and how basically what kind of features were there in those, and those things will be learned in this lesson. Okay, that is the ancient settlements. How the first people came to Sri Lanka and settled, and how their life evolved over time, and what kind of technologies they used, what kind of a lifestyle they had up to today will be discussed in this lesson. Okay, so to make it very much summarized, we like to have a timeline like this. Okay, so based on the evidence we have today, we believe that the first person in Sri Lanka would have come here about 125,000 years ago. This is Homo sapien. Okay, the type of this man is Homo sapien. Okay, Homo sapien. We are also Homo sapiens, right? You know this, I believe. In the science lesson also, you might be learning this. So, 125,000 years ago, that is the first evidence that we have related to man in Sri Lanka, right? So, how do we know this? You know, but there was a gravel layer. You know, in Sri Lanka, we have a zone called the semi-arid zone, which is very, very dry. Okay, very, very dry. It has a very dry climate. Let me draw that. So if you have Sri Lanka just like this, you have this region, and this region with similar climatic properties, meaning that they are very dry. They are even drier than the dry zone. Rain is very occasional in this region. So this region, for that reason, is called the semi-arid zone. Okay, semi-arid zone. Jaffna is even drier than that, this part. That is why we call it the arid zone. But here we call it semi-arid zone. Mainly areas like Manna, these areas, and Hambantota, Kataragama, Tissamaharama, this area in south, and Manna, Kirinochi, Mulathiv, this area in the north, right? We call it the semi-arid zone. In the semi-arid zone, Pute, in the Iranamadu area here, Iranamadu area, we marked Iranamadu in our map marking seminar. And also in Bundala and Pathirajavela here in Sri Lanka, we found evidence related to the prehistoric man in Sri Lanka. Okay, so that is the first settlements in Sri Lanka, right? We can say. So there was a gravel layer like 30-40 deep under the ground. When we examine this gravel layer, how do we examine this? We have a test called the radiocarbon dating test. In Sinhala, we call it carbon kala nirnaya. So using the carbon in the soil, we can understand how old that is. Okay. So radiocarbon dating is the name of the test, is a lab test that is done by these archaeologists to determine the age of a certain thing. So we found that this gravel layer is 125,000 years old, meaning that there were traces of people. There are traces of, let's say, skeletons or stone tools used by those people, which can be dated back to 125,000 years ago. So based on the evidence that we have today, we believe that the first person or first people in Sri Lanka have a history of 125,000 years. Okay, meaning that the first people. Maybe it's new evidence will be found tomorrow. We never know. But based on what we have today, we believe that 125,000 years ago, people lived in Sri Lanka. Okay, we don't know from where they came and everything. That's very old, right? It's difficult. We don't have a lot of evidence related to that. But all we know is we have evidence related to people who lived here 125,000 years ago. Right. Then, Pute, writing in Sri Lanka started about 2,500 years ago. That is why we always say we have a history of 2,500 years. Okay. So writing was invented in Sri Lanka. This is different from country to country, Pute. Some countries started writing 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. Some countries 3,000 years ago. So this is different. The 2,500 can be different from country to country. Here, let's focus on Sri Lanka only for now, right? Okay, because it's easy. Because we are talking about ancient settlements in Sri Lanka in this unit. We are not talking about the ancient settlements in the Mesopotamian civilization. No, we are talking about Sri Lanka. So writing was invented about 2,500 years ago, right? And when writing was invented, what did people do? When people learned how to write, people started doing what? People started writing. People started recording various historical events or their thoughts that came into their minds in various sources. That is what we learned, like the literary sources, archaeological sources. Okay. So writing of inscriptions mainly started first. Okay. Writings on stones. So that period where we have written evidence related to the past, after writing was invented, we call it history. We call it history. And what about the period before this? Before this, we have a very long period. After writing started, we have a relatively short period. We have come only 2,500 years since writing is started. But before that, we can go to the beginning of mankind. The first man in the world, based on the evidence we have, came to this world about 2.5 million years ago, 2 to 2.5 million years ago, right? But here in Sri Lanka, based on the evidence we have, the first man in Sri Lanka came about 125,000 years ago, based on the evidence we have. Okay. So if it is written, if the past is written, we call it history. And writing was invented 2,500 years ago. That is why we always say, apita avurudu 2500 itihasයක් තියෙනවා. We always say this, right? You have seen in the TV, everywhere, right? Apita 2500 itihasයක් තියෙනවා. That is, itihasa means the written past. Okay. And what about the period before that? Now, when you came to school, we call it the school. And before you came to school, you went to another school. What did we call it? Preschool, right? So, yeah, similar to that, this is called prehistory. So the whole time period that existed before writing was invented, we call it prehistory. Okay. And after writing is invented, we call it history. So you know the difference between prehistory and history now, right? Okay. Now, when it comes to this time, when it comes to the ancient times, okay, let's talk about the climate that existed so many years ago, right? So this climate was very cold and generally very cold. And this climate, Pute, was changing, like when it was raining for ages, for several years. It was generally a very cold climate where, agriculture and everything did not take place much. So this time period, in geographical terms, if you ask a geographical scientist, he will name this climatic period as a Pleistocene era. Pleistocene era in geographical terms. Remember very well, listen to this very carefully. Okay. So this era, which is a prehistoric era, so many years ago, we call it the Pleistocene era. Okay, the whole era from the beginning up to a certain point. I'm gonna show you that now. Now, about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, this climate started changing. It's somewhere here, right? I just put it somewhere here, okay? Now don't talk about the number line and the ratios, proportions. No, I mean, I'm just showing you, I'm just giving you an idea, right? So 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, the climate started changing. And the Pleistocene era went away. And yeah, 1 second. The Pleistocene era started fading away and a new geographical era started, and that era is called the Holocene era. Now, what happened during the Holocene era? Around 10,000, 12,000 years ago, the Holocene era started, and the climate started becoming warmer. Okay, the sun started shining and the climate started becoming warmer. During the Pleistocene era, it was a very long era. The climate was very, very cold. But during the Holocene era, the climate started getting warmer and suitable for agriculture. So agriculture started about 10,000, 12,000 years ago. When we are talking about Sri Lanka, the time period can be a little less because, we don't have evidence that are more than 3,000, 4,000 years old in Sri Lanka. Okay. So anyway, we can do a guess based on the evidence that we have in other parts of the world. So this is what the geologists say. Around 10,000 years ago, the climate started becoming warmer, and this warm climate was a blessing for agriculture. So agriculture could be started with the warm climate. Because of that, the agriculture started and people's lifestyle started changing. Okay, now coming to the lifestyle. Now we spoke about the climatic conditions. Now we'll talk about the lifestyle. Okay. Now, so many years ago, during the prehistoric times, people, people learned how to light a fire like a million years ago. Okay. But we will forget that for now because we are talking about a past that is 125,000 years old in Sri Lanka, because the first person in Sri Lanka would have come about 125,000 years ago from today. About, not accurate, right? We never know. Tomorrow we might find new evidence that people lived here 500,000 years ago also. Don't be surprised. Okay. Now, what about the lifestyle of those people? They lived a nomadic lifestyle. They didn't have a permanent place to live. So we call this man the prehistoric man. Okay, prehistoric man. So the person who lived during the prehistoric era lived a nomadic lifestyle. Nomadic lifestyle means hunting and roaming, no permanent place of living. Hunting and roaming. Today one place, tomorrow 7-10 kilometers away. Looking for food. Hunting, roaming, gathering. Hunting for food, hunting animals, and gathering food. Okay, hunting animals like buffaloes, wild boar, deer, samba deer, porcupine, these kind of animals, or eating freshwater fish if it is if they are living near water sources, eating freshwater fish, or eating tree snails. Tree snails are the favorite food, and the scallops, or we call it the oysters. Okay, oysters and tree snails. Tree snails, the most favorite food of the prehistoric man. And they also knew how to use salt. We have evidence related to the salt that were used by ancient people as well. So that was generally the food style of them. And the lifestyle, they lived in groups. They lived a hunting and gathering type of a lifestyle. Nomadic lifestyle, it is called. And Pute, where did they live? They didn't know how to build a house. And during the rainy season, they lived inside caves. Simple, right? You can think this. During the rainy season, they lived inside natural caves, and during the dry season or sunny season, they lived outside in outdoor camps. Okay, so that's their nature of living, or that's their lifestyle in the prehistoric man. When it comes to the tools or equipment he mainly used stone tools. Okay, so that is why we call the prehistoric era the Stone Age. We call these ancient times where people use stone tools during the prehistoric era. We call it the Stone Age. Okay, because people use tools made of stones. So different types of stones were used to make these tools. And big stones were used as grinding stones. For example, granite pieces were used like that, and small stones like ground glass type of alabaster, like kahanda stones, were used to make these small tools for cutting, chopping, and hunting, and these kind of things. Okay, so that is called the Stone Age. Now, I told you earlier about 10,000, 12,000 years ago, the climate started changing, and that era is called the Holocene era. So people's lifestyle also started changing with it. So they might have thought like, okay, now you can grow the food, and why do you hunt, or why do you gather food? For example, I forgot to mention one thing, that is, when it comes to the food style of the prehistoric man, they gathered some food, right? The plant-based foods like wild breadfruit. You need starch also, right? With the animals, you get the proteins, but you need starch also to your body for the energy in the body. Protein will build you muscle, and energy, you need starch for your energy to keep the day going, right? So, in order to get starch, they ate wild breadfruit and wild plantains and yams. Okay, like different types of yams. Yams are different types of potatoes, like in ala, katu ala, kiri ala, like batala. These are all yams. Okay, manioc also, tapioca. These kind of yams were also eaten by them. Different types. Today we have more different types or varieties of yams. Okay, right now. Uh, that is the lifestyle of the prehistoric man. That is the food style of the prehistoric man. But towards the end of the prehistoric era, towards the end of the prehistoric era and the beginning of the historic era, this lifestyle started changing. Okay, because that is mainly because of the climatic change that happened with the starting of Holocene era. Now, when the Holocene era started, the climate, like I said before, became warmer and more suitable for agriculture. So people would have thought like, why hunt when you can grow? Why gather when you can grow? Or why hunt when you can rear? When you can breed animals, why do you want to hunt? So the agriculture lifestyle started when the Holocene era started. And so many changes happened in the people's lifestyle. Okay, like agriculture started. Use of iron started. They discovered that iron can be extracted from natural minerals like limonite and hematite, and iron tools can be used more efficiently. Iron tools are better than the stone tools that they were using, and can be used for agriculture plus hunting if required. So use of iron, use of clay also started during the Holocene era. Okay, and that is Holocene era is the geographical era, right? And people also learned how to build houses. Okay, so building houses also started during this period. So many changes in agriculture, or their lifestyle, their food style started during this period, as you can see. Then they also followed a proper burial tradition. I will come to that later. Okay, so during the after the prehistoric era, or towards the end of the prehistoric era and the beginning of the historic era, so many changes started happening. So we can say this time period is a time period like a transitional time period. So people are transitioning from the Stone Age to the modern age. So many changes started happening during this time, like I have mentioned here. And this time period, Pute, or this era, we call it the proto-historic era. Everybody understand, Pute? Yes. Any question, please ask. Proto-historic era. So this is the prehistoric era. This is the historic era. And the proto-historic era is where a lot of changes in lifestyle, in food style, in technology, in their traditions, like the beliefs, burial traditions, started happening during this era. Okay. So that is starting from 10,000 years to 12,000 years ago. Up until writing was invented, we can say 2,500 years ago. When writing was invented, the building of houses, the settlements started expanding. They started expanding, houses became villages, villages became towns, towns became cities, cities and everything started becoming countries. Rulers were born to rule them, and tanks were built for agriculture. Tanks were connected to each other, and tank systems were built. So many things started happening after this time period. Okay. So then we can call this the historic era, where those expansion of settlements and the civilization was properly established. And the first few hundred years, we can say, of the historic era, we can call it the early historic era. So early historic era. Okay, the first few hundred years. Then history. So history, we have the modern history and we have everything now contemporary era. Okay. So the first few hundred years, we call it the early historic era, right? Where the settlements started expanding. Now, I will tell you the burial tradition of the prehistoric man and the proto-historic man, right? The burial tradition was very clear during the proto-historic era, but not during the prehistoric era. No proper burial tradition was followed by the prehistoric man, and hunting and gathering food was the food style. Now I told you examples, right? What kind of animals they hunted and what kind of meals or what kind of vegetables or yams and stuff they ate. So there was no proper burial tradition during prehistoric era. When somebody died during the prehistoric era, they buried the dead body inside the cave. They dug a pit inside the cave, put the dead body inside, covered with garbage. Garbage means not this municipality garbage, which is very smelly. Not that garbage. We are talking about Colorado again. Yeah, these pieces of branches of trees and all. So they covered with garbage the dead body and let it decay. Okay, let it decay, let it decompose so that only the skeleton is remaining. And then they brought the skeleton back to earth, meaning that they undug the grave and took the skeleton back. And sometimes we can see those skulls are polished or those skulls are painted in red, and they buried those bodies back or buried those skeletons back. That cannot be considered a proper burial tradition. That is but the ritual that were followed by the prehistoric man. Prehistoric man. But during the proto-historic era, people started learning or people started getting more civilized, we can say, and people also had a proper burial tradition. So during the proto-historic era, Pute, in Sri Lanka, people used a burial tradition. Not only in Sri Lanka, in other countries also you can see this burial tradition. This burial tradition is called the megalithic burial tradition. Under the megalithic burial tradition, there were two types of burials mainly. The first one is cyst burials. The other one is urn burials. Okay, the megalithic burial tradition. So what is megalithic burial tradition? Mega means what Pute? Mega? Mega bottle. Coke mega bottle. What is that? Yeah. Mega is huge, big. Lithic means with a stone. So big stone tradition, something like that, right? If you translate this, I'm not expecting you to, but just to understand the word I just told you. So under megalithic burial tradition, what you do is you take big 4 stone splinters, pieces of stone, you arrange them in a square shape or rectangle shape, and you put the remains of the people inside that in clay pots. You place clay pots inside. This is the drone view, okay? This is when you are looking at from the top, right? So you put remains or ashes of people inside this and you cover it with a huge stone slab. And that type of burial is called the cyst burial, okay? Cyst burial here, this one, right? Cyst burial. Whereas 4 stone splinters are used, square shaped, human remains are placed inside and covered with a huge stone slab. You can see these cyst burials in Ibban Katuwa, Yatigal Potta, Heavenivilla, Galsohon Kanatta. You can see that that's what we marked in our map marking seminar. And Pute, you can, we also have another type of burials that is called the urn burials. Urn burials. And that urn burial means you have huge clay pots or vessels. You can place human remains inside those huge clay vessels and bury the whole clay vessel under the ground. That is called urn burials. Okay. And there was another type of burial which is called the clay tub burial tradition. Oh, that is not megalithic. This is another type, and that is called the clay tub burials. What is clay tub burials? Clay tub burial means, Pute, you make a boat shaped clay tub like a bathtub. Okay, make a boat shaped clay tub. This is how you will see it when you are looking from the top. From the side, it will look something like this, like a bathtub. Yeah, right. Now you place the dead body inside the bathtub, the clay tub. Yeah, and then you set fire to it, or you cremate it. In proper words, we call it like burning a dead body. We call it cremating a body, right? So you cremate it. In the process of burning, will bake this clay and make it very hard. And these clay tub burials can be seen, and that's good evidence because they are very old. They are like 3,000 years old. They are still there because of because they become hard when also a lot of technology associated with these clay tub burials. Like use of oxygen, for example, people knew how to use oxygen, and also the perpendicular shape, the perpendicular angles of these walls to the ground, which prevented collapse of these clay tubs, right? So the technology was also used in building those. So that is the ritual side of it, the clay tub burial. That was another burial tradition followed by the proto-historic man. Everybody understand, Budhe? Any questions up to now? Good question. Okay. Now, one Puta has a question. That is, did prehistoric people use clay? No, we don't have evidence that prehistoric man used clay. But proto-historic man, yes, he started using clay. But remember one thing, Pute. Proto-history is also part of what history, Pute? Yes?
Priest.
Prehistory. Because prehistory is up until you started writing, we call it prehistory. Okay. So proto-history is a sub part, we can say, subcategory or sub-time era, sub-era of prehistoric era. Because until writing, after writing started, we call it history. Before writing started, we call it prehistory. And this proto-historic era is an era within the prehistoric era, towards the end of the prehistoric era and the beginning of prehistoric era. The last part of prehistoric era, we call it the proto-historic era, because people started people changed their lifestyle completely. People were living a nomadic lifestyle in the prehistoric era, and then people started building houses during the protohistoric era. That's a huge difference. That is why that's a transitional period. Okay, people are transitioning to a new era, and that era is called the protohistoric era. Okay, many things started during the protohistoric era, like use of iron started during the protohistoric era, use of clay started during the protohistoric era, agriculture started during the protohistoric era. So, for example, agriculture started during the protohistoric era, but got developed during the early historic era and the historic era. Agriculture was started during the protohistoric era. Tanks were built, tanks were connected to each other, tank systems were formed during the historic era. Use of iron started during the protohistoric era, but many tools, weapons, many things were started to be built in the historic era. Use of clay started during the protohistoric era, but that clay technology got advanced during the historic era. Building houses started during the protohistoric era, but more and more huge constructions were built during the historic era. Okay, I believe everybody understand this. Now coming to the picture in the book, which says Ranchamadama is a prehistoric burial. This is correct because it belongs to the prehistoric era. Anything before writing invented, we call it the prehistoric era. This Ranchamadama burial, the Ranchamadama cemetery you see in the book, the clay tub burials, they are like 3,000 years old. I will tell you the page number 17. You see a photo. So these burials are like 3,000 years old, meaning that they are in the prehistoric era. Okay, but they actually belong to the proto-historic era. So it's not wrong to tell that it's in the prehistoric era, because proto-historic era is also part of the prehistoric era. Understand, Uday? Now, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big doubt that many students might have this doubt, so I took some time to explain that. Right. Okay. Now, the most important parts are discussed. Now you should understand the lifestyle, the difference of lifestyle between the prehistoric man and the protohistoric man and the early historic man as well. Now let's take a look at a little in detail about the early historic era. Okay. Now, during the early historic era, villagers were born. Okay, we can say villagers were born during the early historic era. The settlements, we can say, started expanding. Houses were built during the proto-historic era, but these houses started expanding and became villages, and villages went on to become towns and cities later on, and that happened in the historic era. So in the meantime, you can see when the agriculture started, use of iron, everything started, the historic era also started. So I will come to the evidence later. I will come to the evidence side of it later. I'll just talk about the lifestyle now. Okay. So during the historic era, villages were born, and villages were based out of professionals. Okay. For example, farmers got together and formed their own villages. We call them Kasikaragama. Fishermen also found their own villages. We call them Kevattagama. Carpenters also found their own villages. Gem miners found their own villages. Potters who worked building pots and all, they found their own villages. Kumbhakaragama. Kumbhakaragama. Then those who herd cattle, like the cowboys, they also had their own villages. Gopalagama. Okay, so different types of villages were born, we can say, during the historic era or early historic era itself. And some villages had a tank. Okay, so the ancient word used to call the tank was Vapi. So Vapi Gama means with the villages with tanks. Village with tank. Vapi Gama. Village with the tank. Okay, so there were different types of villages as well. For example, there was a village called Pattanagama. Pattanagama means they are close to the harbor. So to supply services to the harbor, where people who work in the harbor live, or loading, unloading, these kind of things happen. in that village, and that is called Pattanagama. Then there was another village called Niyamgam. Niyamgam means Pute, they are trading villages where that village is used as a marketplace. So producers or sellers and buyers, they meet in that village and business happen in that village. So for that matter, those villages are called Niyamgam or trading villages. So there are different types of villages like that, okay, based on different types of professionals who lived in those villages. And if the village had a tank, we call it the Vapigama. And we have different types of villages to learn when it comes to early historic era as well. Okay. Now, when it comes to the evidence related to prehistoric man, we have different places in the country where we have evidence related to prehistoric man. Okay. So the oldest evidence is found in Bundala and Patirajavela. Bundala or Patirajavela. We found stone tools, which are very, very old. We found evidence of those kind of things. And that gravel layer that we found in Bundala Patirajavela, the Iranamadu area in the semi-arid zone, we call it the Iranamadu formation. That gravel layer with a lot of evidence related to prehistoric man in the country. And apart from that, Pute, we also have evidence in caves, cave settlements of people. Good examples are Pahiyangala Lena in Bulat Singhala Kalutara district. We marked this in the map marking seminar, if you can remember. And Pahiyangala Lena. Then we have Kuruvita Batadomba Lena in Ratnapura district, Kuruvita Batadomba Lena. And we also have Kitulgala Belilena. Yes, Kitulgala Belilena. That also after Avisavel, you go towards Kitulgala, it's around 15-20 kilometers from Avisavel. You have this area called Kitulgala Belilena. In Kitulgala Belilena, for example, we found wild breadfruit that was baked and eaten by people in the ancient times, 12,000 years ago. We also found some salt in Kitulgala Belilena, meaning that from Kitulgala, they came to the coastal areas, they gathered salt because they knew they were using salt. They knew the importance of salt. So because of the evidence that we found in Kitulgala Belilena, we know that the ancient prehistoric man also used salt. Okay, so you need to understand that as well. So when it comes to proto-historic era, Pute, we don't have a lot of evidence related to proto-historic era, but a few sites that can give us evidence related to proto-historic era. When it comes to the lifestyle of proto-historic man, we only have one place, one strong site of evidence. That is called the house in Udarancha Madama. So there's a place called Udarancha Madama, close to Rancha Madama in Ratnapura district. You can mark it using the same dot like we did in the map marking seminar. And the house that we found in Udarancha Madama is a proto-historic house that is about 3,000 years old. That house gives us a lot of information. We found painted clay pots, painted parts of clay pots. We call it potsherds in that house. Inside the house, we found parts of pots which are painted clay pots. We found iron tools, traces of iron tools in the kitchen of that house. We didn't find the whole house. We found only the foundation of the house. So we started excavating the foundation of the house. We found this evidence. And we found traces of iron tools. We also found traces of stone tools. Okay. We found bones of hunted animals. We also found bones of reared animals. Reared animal means like you are doing animal husband. You are growing animals like goat, sheep, like chicken. Those are not hunted animals. No, those are animals that you can grow, right? Or rear. We call them rearing animals. And cattle also, cows, buffaloes, and we found bones of hunted animals plus reared animals. Now, what does that say about the proto-historic man? Did he give up hunting completely? No. He started rearing animals, but he did not give up hunting completely. He started agriculture, but he did not give up hunting completely. Okay. He started agriculture, but didn't give up hunting completely. The next thing is, he started using iron tools, but he did not give up using stone tools. Why? Because it's in the beginning, right? You just started making iron tools. What if the iron tool broke? You still need the old one, right? Like it's like you are buying an iPhone 15 Pro Max and you are having a, let's say, iPhone 8 or something like that. You don't throw the iPhone 8 straight away until you get used to the new phone, until you are fully okay with that, until you transfer all the data, until you have a smooth operation. You don't just give it away, you don't throw it out. You keep the old version with you just in case of an emergency. Okay, so this is what can be substituted here. So basically they started agriculture, but what if a flood came and they didn't know how to, the harvest is very low, and how do they survive? You have to go back to hunting, you have to go back to your old habits. And they started using iron. What if the iron tool broke? You have to go back to the old habit, that is using stone tools. So they didn't completely abandon hunting, or they didn't completely abandon use of stone tools, based on the evidence that we have in the proto-historic house found in Udarancha Madam. Okay, so that needs to be remembered very well. In the early historic era and the historic era, those settlements started expanding and leaders were born during those times. Okay, so let's now, that's about the second lesson. Let's now take a look at the third lesson. Okay, go for a 5 minutes break before our lunch break. Lunch break we'll have around 12:40. We'll go for a 5-minute break. Let's finish lesson number 3 and go and have our lunch. Okay, yeah, 1 second.